Hey, my name is Avery, and I play Counterstrike and I play Melee. The reason why these are my two favorite games is because they have a lot of overlap in terms of their design philosophy and the way that the players interact with them. There are so many strange and seemingly coincidental overlaps in the way that these games have carried out throughout history, and I think it's really interesting to analyze them. To get things started, the appeal of these games is that they exist almost more like a sport than they do a video game. Now, why is that? Similar to football, these games don't really change all that much. And I know in Counter-Strike that philosophy was more true when it was just global offensive, and now that we have switched to CS2, we are being accompanied by a lot of change, but the fundamentals of the game are still almost identical. On the other hand, take for example an esport like League of Legends. It's the biggest esport in the world, but when you're looking at a game that changes as much as League does, you find that the best teams are the ones who are able to improvise and adapt to the many phases that the game goes through. Thought I'd clarify here, I'm talking specifically about phases in development, or changes that the devs introduce, not changes in just the way that the game is played. For this reason, it's a lot rarer to have eras of dominance like you see in Melee and Counter-Strike. What's beautiful about the Counter-Strike and Melee method of doing things is that despite the game being around for so long, it still hasn't become stale. That's because these games feature mechanical depth that is probably impossible for humans to reach. The skill ceiling is nearly infinite. Let's take a closer look at the design philosophy of these games. When we start to peel back the layers of how this game is designed, and how Counter-Strike is designed, one major thing that they have in common is movement. In Melee, you have a wide variety of movement tools that are accessible to the player in most situations. The restrictions set on when you can dash, wave dash, jump, etc. are extremely limited, and are only placed in situations where they're absolutely necessary. For example, in Counter-Strike, you can't double jump or jump if you're not on the ground, and in Melee, you can't wave dash if you're in the air. This is very much unlike other games, where your movement options are either going to be given to you at random times or taken from you at random times. In Ultimate, you cannot dash within a certain window of having already dashed. That means that your movement is restricted. A lot of the restrictions on your movement that these games do place on the player can be bypassed or reduced with skill and practice. Is there a jump that is too far for you to reach in Counter-Strike? With correct timing, mouse movements, and air strafing, you can get there. Or you could perform a bunny hop beforehand. If you enter what's called a sticky walk in Melee, where you've ran for too long and then tried to turn around, and you can't do a lot of things, you can wave dash out of it. If you want to perform a move that can't be performed in the running state, you might be able to jump cancel it, or, you could wave dash and then be actionable again. It gives you so many options. You know that thing that Franz Jade's always trying to hit? The edge bug? Melee's got that too. It's called an edge cancel. I'm able to cancel the end lag of my down air by sliding off the edge, and then I'm able to perform something else. A major criticism of both games is that a lot of the knowledge required to play them is kind of hidden. You need to rely on the community to help you out. But honestly, I think the community aspect of these games is what makes both of them so beautiful. In Counter-Strike, we have all of these gorgeous skins. Valorant has some cool skins, but honestly the quality is super varied. Some skins are quite clean, have different animations and whatnot, other ones are just busy and chaotic. And the reason why Counter-Strike skins are on top is because they allow their community to make them. Oftentimes we think of Anubis as the only community-made map in the pool, but that changes when you remember that a lot of the officially created Valve maps were originally made by community members back in Source or 1.6. Mirage, Nuke, Inferno. You can call Valve lazy for not updating their game enough or not working on it as much as we would like them to, but at the end of the day, the fact that they've given the community so much control over their game is a huge benefit. Melee, on the other hand, is in kind of a different situation. The devs, or the company that owns the game, are actively trying to kill it, and the community is prevailing despite. But because the community is running so much of the game, we still see a lot of the same sort of beautiful things that I think we really need to celebrate. It does really suck that they're trying to kill us, though. I mean, guys, the game is just it's a masterpiece. Why are you doing that? I even think that you can start thinking about some of the characters and what they represent gameplay-wise, and we can compare them to guns in Counter-Strike. Fox is like the AK-47, you know, the best one, but also pretty difficult to use. Like the AK, Fox has to be precise, but also can output a lot. He has incredibly fast burst options, and so he can take down his enemies incredibly quickly. Marth, on the other hand, is like an op. His moves are very powerful, but they don't stay out for super long. It's relying on you hitting them. I would argue that Marth's tipper serves as somewhat of a headshot mechanic, which doesn't really work into my framework of comparing him to the op, but it does work into my framework of comparing the game to Counterstrike. In Ultimate, Marth and Lucina are both in the game, but nobody plays Marth. Lucina is considered quite strong, but Marth is considered borderline useless. There's no reason to play him, you could just play Lucina. Why? Because Lucina is more consistent. Marth is actually the better character in theory, but Lucina's blade does even damage. In a video game like Ultimate, being the superiorly skilled player is less rewarding than it is in a sport like Melee. I want us to also think about what is lost when you artificially bake accessibility into a video game. Interesting and deep movement mechanics like air strafing and wave dashing are taken out in favor of simplistic movement that is hard to utilize effectively once you get to higher levels of play. In Valorant, spraying is basically useless at any kind of long range because they have made it random, with the idea being that a new player is then closer in skill level to a good player. Now, if you're a casual person enjoying the games, that might be fine for you. Maybe you don't want to learn how to spray, and so Valorant is more comforting. But if you're somebody looking to master something, it becomes incredibly frustrating. There's an option in the game that is seemingly there. You are allowed to hold the spray button down, you are allowed to shoot more than one bullet at once, and yet you're punished for doing so. And in Counter-Strike, a situation like that would be the result of some kind of nuance. You know, spraying is worse in this situation because you could have tapped them, not because the spray itself is random and bad. In Ultimate, there are too many characters. It's incredibly overwhelming and painful for trying to learn matchups. But if you're a new player, the odds that there's a character that's just right for you is much higher. What we've got to do in Melee is we have to choose a character out of the 25 and make that character work for us. The result is a game where, even at the highest levels of play, where the game has been incredibly optimized, one player's Marth might look entirely different from another player's Marth. Here's my M9 bayonet. There are 999 different patterns, and I chose this one because it's got a good amount of blue, purple, but also gold. The gloves kind of match, but not really. I'm kind of in the process of rebuilding. But you know, I put a lot of thought into skins, and I collect them despite them offering me no real advantage in game. Melee doesn't have skins, at least not in the same way, but what it does have are controllers. What you're looking at here is a Club Nintendo. They're kind of rare. They're exclusive to Japan and you don't see them very often. In fact, I don't think I've ever come across somebody else also having a Club Nintendo controller. You can also get custom-made cases and buttons and have a controller that's completely unique. I've customized mine with red buttons and also these spicy sticks, which I actually got because they provide better grip, not necessarily for the color, but overall my controller is unique. And so is my M4. I crafted this myself by putting 4 Copenhagen Wolves stickers on it, ignore the little upside down Cloud9 logo, and you know, I don't think I've ever seen another one of these crafts in the game. Swag points are important parts of the ecosystems of both games. And in both cases, that is true with regards to playstyle and visual aesthetics. If you enjoy Valorant because it has simplified the formula of Counter-Strike, you know, that's okay. If you like playing Ultimate because it's more casual, you don't need to learn how to L cancel or wave dash or any of this tech, then that's fine. You know, those are casual games. But I want to point out that there's a big difference between casually playing a video game and the relationship that a Counter-Strike or Melee player has to their respective game. I'm not necessarily placing a higher value judgment on this. I think it's totally valid if you just like playing video games to relax. But for me, I like playing video games to test my skills, to improve. Counter-Strike and Melee both are media for me to work out the way that my brain and body works. I get to analyze myself at an extremely close level, and then I use these games as media for benchmarking. If I've had a long day and I'm super tired, I probably won't play these games, or if I do, I'll play them in a very casual setting where nothing is on the line. Casual games are art. You appreciate them for their value, and they deliver a message to you. I would argue that the way I engage in Melee and Counterstrike is very different at a fundamental level. Rather than enjoying a piece of media, I am creating it. When you're playing the game, you are making the art. CS and Melee are but tools for creating art, both with different outlooks on how to do it, but the experience is very similar. Despite these games having almost no mechanics in common, I frequently find that improvement in one game will also carry over to the other. Recently, I've been really focusing on my tension control in Counter-Strike. When your muscles are relaxed, it's easier for you to be mentally relaxed, which will help you perform better. But also, tense muscles make it harder for you to perform precise movements. When I went to my weekly Melee local after having not played in a while, I played better than I have in a long time. And that's because I applied the concept that I learned from Counter-Strike to Melee. I took a big break from Counter-Strike, and over the summer I focused mostly on playing Melee. And during that time, I learned a lot of mental techniques for how to not tilt. Now coming back to CS, I can apply those mental techniques, apply those practices, and I'm doing better. If you're a fan of either game but not the other, I recommend you check it out. You know, maybe watch some esports. Both have amazing viewing experiences. The barrier to entry for both games is very different, so if you're into Melee and you want to play Counter-Strike, having a pretty nice computer is a pretty big prerequisite, and in my opinion, playing the game without a nice keyboard and mouse and monitor is not the full experience. As far as Melee goes, the game can be played online with anybody you'd like thanks to emulation, and all you really need is a GameCube controller and adapter, but even those are optional. You can play with an Xbox controller or even your keyboard if you want to. This is mostly a Counter-Strike channel, so if you're watching this, there's a good chance that that's where you're coming from. I'm hoping I just put you onto one of the best games of all time. Maybe in the future I'll do a video about Brood War, because I think that's the secret third esport that's actually a sport, except I'm not good at Brood War, so I don't have as much to talk about there. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. I might do more content about Melee, we'll see how it goes though. I don't want to branch out too early, especially because, you know, I'm just building a viewer base. Hopefully this is interesting to all the Counter-Strike players out there, and with that, I think I'm gonna say peace out.